Alright guys, so I showed one of my acquaintances a picture of my snake room, and he saw all these little tubs and all these racks, and he's like, man, you must spend every day, all day, day and night, feeding each little animal in every tub. And for this video, believe it or not, I hardly spend any time down here, and I kind of wanted to show you how I streamline my rodent and my reptile room here. I have 2 racks of rodents over here, and let me give you a quick tour of the room. So this rack here and here, these are rodents, and then I have all my snakes in all these racks all the way around. So these are my breeder females over here, and then I have a hatchling rack here, which is thinning out since I've been selling at the shows. I have my grow out rack over here, a couple of retics, and I have a big hatchling rack over here. Believe it or not, all these hatchling racks were almost completely full at one point. And since I sold a bunch of snakes at the show, I'm thinning them out, and the maintenance is getting a little bit easier. So I kind of want to show you where I started, how complicated the maintenance was at first. And believe me, at first I was spending a lot of time chasing the rodents, chasing the snakes, and I actually figured out over the last few years how to simplify things. And I kind of wanted to show you how to minimize the maintenance in my reptile room. But first, take a look at these frogs over here. So I bought these Pac-Man frogs at the last show, and I put them in these tubs with moss, and I fed them once, and I can't believe I fed this guy a little a pinky mouse that was almost as big as the frog, and almost overnight this thing ballooned into almost double the size. And it's the same way. I just can't believe how fast they are growing. Just the few days that I've had them, and it's only been like a week, and I only fed them once. And let me tell you, I was reading online, and it says those frogs can grow super fast. They can get like dinner plate size in 6 months. So that's pretty awesome. So let's talk about the maintenance of my reptile room. So I was at the show selling some snakes, this last show, Reptilian Nation, and some guy comes up to my table, and he's looking over the snakes, and he says, my requirement for buying any animal is that I like to travel, and I want to go for 5 days on a trip and come back without even looking at that animal, and I want that animal to be okay. And I started thinking, well, dogs are out for sure. He's got a cat, and that's pretty self-sufficient. But snakes, let me tell you, they are really low maintenance. You can feed them once a week. And one of the reasons I got into the frogs, especially the Pac-Man frogs, is because they're really low maintenance. They already eat when I'm feeding my snakes, and you only have to feed them once a week, and it just fits right in. It's the same diet, the same routine, and hey, why not just throw a few frogs into something a little different? And I'm thinking maybe I could expand my frogs, and at the shows maybe have half frogs and half snakes. That'd be kind of cool, because I mean the diet and the care is almost exactly the same as a snake. You just really want to make sure that they don't dry out. So let's talk about specifically my snakes and the substrate. So if you notice on some of my last videos, I went to a paper substrate with the moss balls, and I was using these moss balls up here for humidity, and that worked really good as far as being economical. And this is basically some netting with some sphagnum moss I use for humidity, and it was working really well. But the problem is the maintenance increased, and I was always chasing all the tubs, trying to get the dirty tubs. And the problem was, especially for the big snakes, is if they would go to the bathroom, then there wasn't really enough absorbent material in there to absorb the mess to where I could kind of extend the maintenance out a little bit further. And I kind of went back to this Pro Coco coconut husk, and it's been working fantastic. And the only thing I really don't like about it is it gets in the water, and you kind of have to chase the water dishes a little bit, but it's not as bad as if you're chasing the paper towels. Look at this beauty. I had this for sale at the show. Didn't sell. I can't even believe it. It's a female calico bamboo. That's a beautiful snake. Then I have some coral glows up here, and you see some of them, the water is perfect. And if you can keep the coconut husk out of the water, the tubs stay really good for a long time. So that's kind of what I switched back to. A lot of these, you can see even if they make a mess in the back, it's kind of contained, and it doesn't really mess up the whole tub. The other thing I like about it is that it really absorbs the smells. You can have a snake in there going to the bathroom over and over, and it can keep away from the mess, and it doesn't smell, which is what I really like. And you kind of get that little smell when you're dealing with paper substrate, and you kind of have to chase it a little bit more. And the problem with the coconut husk is it's more of an expense, so you have to put more into it up front, and it's a little more work trying to break all the blocks apart and set it all up. But I can literally set all my tubs up. It takes me about maybe 5 hours to go through and set up all my tubs with coconut husk, but then they're pretty much set for the month. And I just kind of spot clean when I go through my tubs. And I really don't have to do a full substrate change until the end of the month. So when it comes to the amount of maintenance that is required in your snake room, you are pretty much the judge and the jury, and when the gavel falls, the verdict is out, and it's basically however much you want to work in your snake room. There's different amounts, different levels of care that's required, and you can speed them up or slow them down. You can spend, if you spend every hour of every day in the snake room just picking up your snakes and handling them, and really, it's almost unlimited. But you can also speed it up too. So what I really kind of stumbled into lately is this little water container. And this thing is great for just kind of humidifying the tubs, and it's really, really fast. What took me, I would say, if I went through all these tubs, it would probably take me an hour to go through and spray them all with a pump-up sprayer. And with this little sprinkler can, it only takes me, I'd say, about 15 minutes to go through all the tubs. So if you think about something like that, just something simple, can really save a lot of time in maintenance. So every decision you make for housing and substrate will have a direct impact on the amount of maintenance on your snakes and your rodents, and the amount of free time you have at the end of the week. So if you take a look at my rat rack, I actually originally started with aquariums. And let me tell you, that is a lot of work. I had maybe a fraction of the tubs I have here, but it was in aquariums. And I had little water bottles hanging on the inside and little water dishes, and every day I'd go through and fill up all the water bottles, empty out the dishes because all the food would get soiled, and refill them. And I was chasing rodents like you wouldn't believe. And every weekend I was going through and cleaning all the cages. And I didn't have a life because of how much work it took just to take care of my rodents. And then when I went to these racks, it was like freedom, let me tell you. Now I water the whole rack through this tub up here. It waters everything. All I do now is I just come in during the week and make sure these are at least half full, so it has enough pressure to work all the nozzles in the rack. And then all the food is in the back, and I basically put them in these trays back here on every level, and it feeds them. You just have to really make sure that you have enough food, because sometimes you can forget about it. It's so easy. And those trays between these two racks, it'll hold about 300 pounds of this Missouri rat chow food, and that'll last at least a week, even if all these are completely jam-packed with rats. And the fewer rats you have, the longer it'll last. And the more rats you have, the more you kind of have to chase the water and the food a little bit, but it's really not that much maintenance for the food and the water. So now let's talk about the rodent bedding, because you need some kind of bedding in there. And I found the easiest thing for me is this pine bedding. And some pine can be really toxic. You really have to watch it. And this stuff's been working great. I got the brand of pine from a local breeder at a pet store, and it's been working great. I haven't lost any rats due to the toxicity of this bedding. And it's just a kiln-dried pine bedding, which works great. I used to actually go with shredded paper. And shredded paper works really well, but if you have to shred your own paper, let me tell you, for all these racks, it'll take you hours and hours to feed all the paper through the shredder to get enough to fill these racks. And if you have a source of free shredded paper, you can save a pretty big cost doing shredded paper instead of pine. But the only problem is the shredded paper doesn't really last as long. I'd say I can clean these once a week. I can actually go 2 weeks and not change this pine, and it still looks pretty good. But on shredded paper, I can't go more than 3 days on shredded paper. So even though you're saving some cost up front and you think you're getting it for free, you're spending a lot more time. So really, if you think about your time as money, I would recommend going to a kiln-dried pine for your rodent bedding. So feeding the snakes is another thing that takes a lot of time. I would say it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing frozen thawed, it may take a while to kind of plan your day to thaw out the rodents. And right now for these hatchlings, I've been doing frozen thawed mice that I buy online. I'm kind of getting down to where I have about 40 hatchlings left instead of like 100. so my rodent supply almost can keep up. I'm still buying some frozen mice. It takes a little while to thaw them. So what I do is I lay them out and I let them thaw for about 2.5 hours. Then I go back and I put them under a heat lamp for about 10 minutes. So it's not really like I'm standing here working for that like 2.5 hours, but you kind of have to plan your day around it, and it's a lot easier, I think, if you do like a euthanized fresh kill rodent right out of the rat rack. It's these rodents are like immediately accessible, and that saves a lot of time. You really don't have to plan around it. But let me tell you, the other thing you have to really spend some time on is organizing your rodent rack and moving the males with the females, retiring the females, raising up some new females to replace your old females, it's pretty complicated once you dig into that. But that's kind of, once you get the system going, it's not a lot of routine maintenance. It's just a matter of coming down here once a week and moving some males around. Okay, the other thing that takes some time is planning your breeding season if you're breeding snakes or ball pythons in this case. And I'd say the most of the time it takes is planning it and putting together the schedule. And then once you get that, it's basically just moving your males through your females and kind of following the schedule. And then later on in the season, it's collecting the eggs, setting them up in the incubator. I don't really consider that work. That's the fun part. Or when the eggs hatch and you're cutting open the eggs. I mean, some of this stuff, it's really exciting once you get into it. And most people working in a snake room like this, none of this is really work. It's kind of your passion. And if you enjoy what you do for a living, they say you'll never work a day in your life. So, so that's kind of what I think of the ball python breeding season. It's my favorite part of the whole hobby, I would say. And I don't really consider it work, but it does take some time. Okay, so you're probably wondering, all right, how much time does it really take to maintain this room full of rodents and snakes and hatchlings? And let me tell you, it's not really that much time at all. I'd say on average, it's probably, I would say, less than an hour a day. And a lot of people kind of complain. They're like, oh yeah, I used to have snakes, and every Sunday, all day long, I'm working on the snakes. Well, the thing with snakes is all the work doesn't have to be done all on the same day. So probably the best way to do maintenance, especially in a rodent room, snake room, where you don't really have everything kind of due all at the same time, is to do a little bit of work every day. And I like to get down here and spend like half an hour or 45 minutes just kind of going through. And normally what I do now is I don't even go through and clean all these rat tubs. I can clean all these rodent tubs in about an hour. And typically, I don't even clean. I clean like a third of them. So maybe I'm down here for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, just cleaning, dumping and refilling some of these rodent bedding, the bedding and the rodent tubs, and just kind of topping off the water and the food, and that's it. And I'll call it a day. And if you keep on it and stay on top of it, it's really not a lot of work. And for me, it's really enjoyable, and it's not really work per se. I really enjoy it. And I enjoy bringing you guys along for the ride too. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.